pro-Gaddafi forces in the south of Tripoli. The pictures in the report we're about to show by Sky's Stuart Ramsey will add to the growing evidence which could be used in war crimes trials. We must warn you that his report shows the result of the massacre, including disturbing pictures of many burned bodies and skeletons. You may not want to watch, particularly with children, but we do feel it's important that the evidence is seen. And those pictures begin 20 seconds into Stuart's report.
Only as the rebels push into the southern heart of Gaddafi's support in Tripoli is the true picture of this regime's capability for violence becoming apparent. In a burnt-out warehouse, they showed us how awful it could be. Still smouldering, the bodies of 53 people, civilians we are told, murdered in cold blood as the first news spread that Gaddafi's Bab al-Azizia compound was falling. It's believed 150 were killed here. Some, they say, are buried in the compound. The stench of death is horrendous. They aren't sure where all the bodies are buried. Locals heard screams and came to see what was happening in what was normally a farmyard warehouse.
We were here near this mosque and we heard some people shouting, right? About 5-10 people, we want to come here and to see what's happening and whether some people are calling for help. We hear some guns are going on. I mean, their pumps are going on here inside. And then when we just come by near, we found some snipers there above that. And they start shooting. So we went back, right? Next day morning, I mean, after maybe, I don't know, 1 hour or so, everything is quiet. And there were about 3 people injured, and they escaped, okay? And they are now in Tripoli Medical Center. If you want to see them, you can go there and to see them. You can see them, okay? Okay, next day morning we tried to come. We find some militias here who are carrying these guns on the cars, and they told us, please go back, or otherwise we will shoot you.
When the rebels came, they first found 3 bound, executed bodies in military uniform outside. The prisoners were 50 meters away. From the midst of the crowd, one man was brought to us. He was, he said, a survivor, a prisoner who got lucky and escaped.
On this moment, about 10 to 11 people, they were tried to escape outside.
بدوا يرموا في الرصاص من جديد علينا وكملوا على همها بالتفجير بالرمانات وجزء من الجيش لحقنا واحنا نهربوا.
They were trying to kill them even when they escaped. Some of them went this direction and the others went the other direction.
والجرحى اللي كانوا محطوطين هنا هم اللي صفوهم هم اللي قتلوهم.
Some more people injured here, they killed them.
لأن المنطقة اللي احنا فيها هي بالتحديد كانت منطقة تنفيذ اغتيالات للضباط الليبيين اللي يرفضوا في تنفيذ الأوامر.
He said this place was for executing the people who are exactly refusing to kill the other people, the civilian people.
Well, this is the fate that befell some of Colonel Gaddafi's prisoners. They say that the people who are in here only wanted freedom and have been arrested because they disagree with the Gaddafi regime. They say that there are many more bodies buried, not just in this immediate compound, but in warehouses and buildings that surround here. This is a crime scene, but the people of the local village are going to bury these bodies as soon as they can, but the investigators will no doubt have to come in at some point. Exactly who was murdered is unclear. They could be soldiers, civilians, or a mixture. It actually doesn't matter, though, because in the final days of the regime, these people were gunned down and were set on fire in cold blood. Another crime to investigate here. There will likely be many more.
And Stuart now joins us from Tripoli. Stuart, horrific scenes you've witnessed. What do you think they tell us about what's been happening during the fighting there?
Yeah, well, I think it shows that certainly the Gaddafi regime, as they were withdrawing, were prepared to do pretty much anything to get rid of people they didn't like. Now, we don't know who was actually murdered there. I suspect there were some soldiers in there. In that interview, that gentleman who said he wasn't did say that they'd been told that they were about to be released and that they were murdered, and he described it as a place where people who wouldn't shoot civilians were being held and were then killed. Either way, we understand from the locals that there were civilians inside as well. Again, either way, those people were murdered as they were withdrawing. There have been accusations against both sides, of course, of atrocities, and they will be investigated. It's going to take some time before that happens, but it just illustrates, I suspect, what the Gaddafi regime was like. These murders happened just as Bab el-Zizia was falling, about 7:30 at night on the 23rd. The timings are absolutely correct, and it appears that they just decided to shoot the prisoners, prepare to flee. Some of them did, some of them stayed behind, and they were then killed in the compound next to that farmyard. So it really has been a nasty revolution in parts of this, and the investigation will really have to find out what happened, but it's been very, very nasty indeed.
And as you say, locals are convinced that this is the work of Gaddafi's forces.
No doubt in their minds whatsoever, because they live near the compound. It was a farmyard, and they went to it to find out who was making screams. Why were people screaming in there? And the first people who stopped them were soldiers initially, then snipers who fired over their heads. They went back the next morning, and it was Gaddafi militia who told them to go away or they would be shot. They went away, and then a couple of days later the rebels came forward. So there's absolutely no doubt in their minds that this was done by the Gaddafi people, because one of their big camps is right next door. The wall is adjacent to it. What they were saying is that there have been other incidences of people coming in the night, digging holes. They hear the sound of gunfire, then the holes were covered over, and in the morning camels had been put above them. They say it was either to take away the smell, or it was to try and make it look as if it was an ordinary farmyard. They'd said this had been going for a long time, but of course people were very, very scared under the Gaddafi regime. And in that area, although these people are coming out and saying that this should be brought before the International Criminal for the ICC, excuse me, they are saying that, and they were likely, excuse me, to have been Gaddafi supporters. What they're saying now is that's over. This was a plain crime, and it has to be investigated. So that information, of course, was given to the rebels, and we were brought forward to see it. As I say, very, very nasty incidents here over the last few days.
Stuart Ramsey, live in Tripoli. Thank you. Well, rebel forces are saying they're now largely in control of Tripoli. But after days of intense fighting, the city's been left without food, water and vital supplies. The National Transitional Council says the shortages should start to be redressed as vital links into the city are restored. This report from Sky's senior correspondent Michelle Clifford contains images of dead bodies.
Even what was once in abundance here is now desperately hard to come by. In the oil-rich capital, petrol is a scarce resource, not only impeding the movement of residents, but the fighters still taking on Gaddafi's forces. The search for fuel takes up precious time.
As you know, the price of fuel used to be cheaper than water in Libya, but now it's more expensive than gold. This is because of Gaddafi.
Residents of this city are gradually emerging from days of hiding, only to discover many stores and markets are closed, others destroyed during the fighting. Food, like everything else here, is now in short supply.
Of course we need food, safety, and we want to start preparing for Eid.
We're calling on the rebels to open the shops and the market. We can't find food or water or anything. We want the market to open again and life to return back to normal.
Normality, though, seems a long way off in a city where more than 1 million people are grappling with a breakdown in basic services. Gaddafi's forces stand accused of cutting off water supplies. Electricity and communications have been interrupted, and residents are having to do what they can to clear up rubbish festering in the streets. Britain has responded to calls for food, medical supplies and equipment, but the National Transitional Council is facing the first of what will be massive challenges.
The most basic services, the needy ones, are the ones that we are concentrating on now, which are the health sector. In addition to that, we also have the electricity problem, we have the water problem, we have the communication problem.
But much will depend on improving security in the capital, allowing vital supplies and equipment to get through. Checkpoints have been set up on most roads to secure the area from Gaddafi loyalists who are accused of randomly shooting civilians. But those same forces now taking charge stand accused of their own abuses. Some claim they killed wounded men in their beds at the local hospital. Decomposing bodies have lain at the facility for days. It isn't actually known who carried out the attacks, but there is emerging evidence of ill treatment by both sides.
We've heard of people who have escaped from military camps run by Gaddafi forces who told us how upon leaving, the guards basically shot them and tried to kill as many prisoners as possible. And we've also seen people held by opposition forces who told us of how they had been beaten up or mistreated.
The Transitional National Council is being urged to ensure its troops act responsibly to avoid a descent into the kind of chaos that plagued Iraq for years. Chaos born not just of a failure of infrastructure and institutions, but of security. The rebels and their political representatives now seeking to govern have much to deliver. Michelle Clifford, Sky News.
Well, we can talk now to a doctor in Tripoli, Dr. Al-Arabi, who joins me now on the line. Thank you for talking to us, Dr. Al-Arabi. I understand that you work in a hospital in Abu Salim, that district of Tripoli, the scene, of course, of those pictures of dozens of bodies yesterday. Are those scenes that you witnessed yourself?
Well, actually, I used to be the administrator of the hospital a few months ago, and I left the hospital not by force. Actually, they come to my office and they kicked me out. What I'm trying to tell you, the Abu Salim hospital used to be a trauma hospital in the region, and it's the nearest hospital to Bab al-Aziziyah, where the Gaddafis used to stay. Actually, this hospital is being used by the militia and being used by the Gaddafi's forces. And the area itself, Abu Salim Hospital, it used to belongs to his people. Unfortunately, on last Saturday, on 20th of August, when the rebels comes over, actually the hospital was shut down. Nobody can come in. All the doctors or nurses has left the hospital. We have one of the doctors and one of the nurses, two nurses and 4 technicians. With them, they kept inside the hospital, and with them they stay in the ICU, in the intensive care unit, with 15 patients. 4 of them was in ICU. The other 10 or so in post fractures or post laparotomies and surgical patients.
So why was
they stay until last Thursday? It's about 5 days. They kept in a hospital, snipers over the hospital, till last Thursday, when the rebels comes over and they free the hospital from the gangs or from the militia. We found more than 50 bodies inside the hospitals, in the corridors, in the reception, in the A&E department, and inside the rooms. It's actually very bad smelling. Yesterday there was a report from the BBC showing pictures. It's really very, very bad smelling, and nobody can come over. It's only today the cleaners and the fumigation has to be started. We hope that we can go back to the hospital within one week or so. It's really quite disaster. We evacuate to start with 50 people, and then another 30 people in the coroner space. We have another section where we kept the other bodies. So it's a total is around 80 bodies in the hospital. It's really very bad and disastrous area.
Well, Doctor,
for the hospital, sorry, yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We appreciate you telling us your story and your experience. We must leave it there. Dr. Al-Arabi, we appreciate your time. Thank you. More evidence has emerged of the luxury lifestyle enjoyed by the Gaddafi clan. The pictures that you're seeing now were taken inside the home of Saif al-Arabi, one of Colonel Gaddafi's children. The house was hit by a NATO missile, causing extensive damage. The property was then ransacked by looters. The fate of Saif Gaddafi is not known. Well, with the rebels largely in control of Tripoli, the battle is now on for Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte. It lies between the capital and the opposition stronghold of Benghazi, effectively splitting the country right down the middle. So taking it is a key objective for the anti-Gaddafi forces. Rebels advancing on Sirte are engaged in fierce fighting and today took control of the city of Bin Jawad. Well, Sky's security editor Sam Kiley is very close to there.
Well, there was a very rapid advance, rather unexpected. The rebels had been expecting to have to dig in and fight an extended artillery duel while things were sorted out in Tripoli. Now, the sudden moves in Tripoli clearly released a lot of NATO jets yesterday afternoon and last night, and they were able to attack the Gaddafi front lines, particularly the heavy weapons. This had been essentially an artillery duel for about 3 days. And mid-morning, there was a sudden breakthrough. Gaddafi's troops retreated some 25 kilometres back into Brega. They then followed a substantial fight there. I'm speaking to you from an artillery position that just about 2 hours ago was firing into that city centre, or town centre should I say, to try to soften up the Gaddafi's last of his infantry, the rear guard, before the rebels were able to sweep in. They are now just taken the whole of Brega town. This is an extremely sensitive place for the rebels, excuse me, because in the past they have been betrayed twice by the local population, who invited them in and then turned on them and killed large numbers. But nonetheless, now that they're much more organised, the rebels are able to draw on. They have much better communications with NATO, and just in the last half hour they have continued to maintain the pressure on Gaddafi's retreating forces with very large numbers of salvos from the multiple rocket launchers known as a Grad or a Stalin organ, firing 40 long-range rockets with a range of up to 30 or 40 kilometres on those retreating Gaddafi forces. And they're now confident that if they can hold Bin Jawad, they can start to consolidate again and then push on towards Sirte, because there isn't an obvious town to take a stand in for Gaddafi's troops down that road. There has been intelligence that about 5 to 10 kilometres outside of Bin Jawad there is a defensive line built into a dry riverbed, a wadi called Wadi Hamra, where Gaddafi's troops were expected to make a last stand, or at least try to hold up the rebel advance, but that is clearly now the subject of these sustained bombardments.
Sam Kiley. You're watching Sky News. Do stay with us. Coming up,